And this is my attending exercise, which is loosely based on Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25, where Jesus calms the storm. Well, my story begins July 16th, 1969, when three men set out on a voyage that would take them 4 days. They had planned and prepared for several months for this trip, and but they only planned to stay at their destination for about 21 hours, and that was their goal, and then return home. Well, you may or may not have guessed by the date, but who they were. These three men were Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. You may not recognize the name Michael Collins, but you will after this story. Well, the spaceship, uh, once it left Earth's orbit, had a module, which called the module, which was the command module, called the Columbia. And connected to the Columbia, there was a smaller module called the Lunar Lander, which was the Eagle, and it was intended to be piloted by Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, and to land on the moon. Well, their mission was simply stated at the beginning, and it was to land on the moon and return to Earth. Well, they took with them on their journey a few items. There was a plaque they had to place at the moon, along with the flag they planted. They also carried two large American flags, flags of all 50 states, including District of Columbia and the U.S. territories, flags of other nations that were part of the United Nations. And what they did, they took these with them. They flew them there, and then they flew them back. That was what they did. They that was for some kind of to say these were the flags that went to the moon, and they would have them on display. Well, back to the story. 4 days after they took off, they found themselves in the moon's orbit. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, they made their way to the cramped cabin of the lunar lander, the Eagle, and prepared themselves to separate from the Columbia. This was the command module. Well, as soon as they separated, they followed their plan. It was a precise plan of the precise landing spot on the moon. Something happened. The gyroscopes in their landing, or actually in their computer, which is a very rudimentary type of computer system, the gyroscopes failed, and they had no real control, no automatic control of the lunar lander to get them on the moon's surface. So they had to do it manually. So they had to fly it themselves without aid of a computer. Well, what happened as a result of this, they missed their landing spot, and they landed some distance from where they were intended to land, and it was not on the map point or that plot where they originally planned. Well, the good news was they actually landed, so they landed safely. The bad news was they were not entirely certain that they would be able to go home because of some complications, and I'll get to that momentarily. Well, they pressed forward with their mission anyway while they were there for their 21 hours. They collected about 45 pounds of moon rocks. They planted their American flag, and they secured the plaque to one of the legs of the lander. The lander had their name and their mission, and I'll explain a little bit more as we close. But after their 21st hour on the moon, actually, it's 21 hours and 38 minutes total. They decided it was time to take off because they're running low on oxygen, and it was critical that they meet the orbiting Columbia at a certain point in time in order to be able to successfully get back home. But that, again, was the problem. They didn't have any computer guidance systems operational to get them in that precise orbit where they needed to be in order to meet the Columbia. Well, the orbiting Columbia had to, again, be precisely over the exact spot and a plot on a map where he dropped them off, where this is where Michael Collins dropped them off. But since they were off course and their guidance system was not functioning, the men in the Eagle knew that their chances of survival were pretty slim because they didn't have enough oxygen to linger on the moon's surface any longer, and they certainly did not have enough oxygen to be in orbit around the moon waiting for the Columbia to try to find them. Well, the story of panic from the men on the Eagle, it didn't make the papers. But truly, these two men feared for their lives, and they placed their very lives in the hands of Michael Collins. If Michael Collins had been off on his calculations, they would all certainly die. The threat of death was real, and there was nothing that these two astronauts in the Eagle could do anything about it. Well, in order for this mission to succeed, the Columbia had to be at a precise place, as I mentioned, and somehow spot them visually in the thousands of miles of this sea of space. Well, the good news is that Michael Collins knew what he was doing. He had studied the maps of the lunar surface, and using a slide rule, which was a kind of a rudimentary calculator, because calculators weren't invented yet, he plotted a new way or new course to meet the Eagle. And as the orbiter approached the Eagle, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, they were amazed that Michael Collins was able to find them because it was an impossible task. In summary, Michael Collins performed nothing less than a miracle that day, saved the two men who were on the Eagle, and then once they connected back, they began their 4-day journey home. They landed safely in the Pacific Ocean, and they were picked up by the USS Hornet 195 miles, or actually 195 hours from the time they left Earth. So again, there was a miracle in the making that is often overlooked by everyone who knows the story. And I believe that will be the end of my week 6 lesson. Thank you.